in Texas State next month, so we're going all over Fairtown. And, yeah, and his girlfriend's flute. She's has her music auditions at North Texas and SMU and somewhere else. So my husband wants to, there's a job posted, Judge, be the prosecutor in Palau, which is in the Pacific.
Oh,
It's a 2-year stint. He wants us to just leave. He said, when the kids leave, let's just go to Palau, live on the beach.
okay. I will say
crazy.
that's going to be awesome though.
Like, that's crazy.
I know some.
No, but you're going to enjoy it.
From there,
Yeah.
and they couldn't stop talking about how beautiful their
Oh.
native country was.
Oh. See, you're not helping because I'm like, I'm
No.
babies. And he's like, they're not babies. Let's go.
Okay, that would be fun though. And then that'll be another place for me to visit.
Yeah. We'll see. I haven't
But we're
applied.
not there yet.
I mean, Carl and Doug might kill me.
Yeah.
I kind of mentioned it in passing. And Carl's like, I guess you could take a 2-year leave, leave your name on the door, and we just take your part of the money. And I was like, yeah, we could come to some sort of agreement. I gotta head out. And my paralegal goes, you need a paralegal to go with you? First
See,
off, I'd have to get the job. But since it's been posted for a year, I don't think anybody's applying. There's that one, there's one in the Mariana Islands, and there's one in some other island place, all in the TDCA, job bank thing. We love the beach, so I mean, I don't know. They'd have to drug me to get me there, though. It's a day and a half on an airplane. You go here, you go, and I hate flying, and especially over the ocean. I just feel like I'd be on Castaway, like. Mm-mm.
Do you remember Bill Reese?
Hey, you went to
Yes.
Hawaii.
Well, he's in the Big Island and he's practicing there. And a really good friend of his was one of those territorial
Yeah.
judges that used to fly from island to island and hear a case. And it was just him and his court reporter, and they'd fly to this island, that island, go back to the Big Island, this island, that island, go back to the Big Island.
Wow, yeah.
and Bill Maher, I think he's in the Bahamas or somewhere.
Well, Anna Scott is a prosecutor in the U.S. Virgin Islands. That's where she went.
See?
Huh.
And
Yeah, Reese is doing pretty well over in Hawaii.
I want to say, I think John Young used to be in some
Well, he
island
was
thing
in-
years
Well, he
ago.
was in the military
Yeah.
probably, so he probably had a connection over there for sure.
But I gotta wait till Andrew at least gets through his first year of college. And if he does that
Ah.
all right, and he's okay, then maybe.
But see, and that'll be a place for them to visit.
Yeah,
Judge, on Robert Montes,
Oh, just give me 1 second
I'm not so great, but.
and I'll be ready to take this up.
okay.
I love the beach. Living life on the beach.
All right, Robert Montes.
He's in custody. I've talked to him twice already today. I can't really do anything without the prosecutor. I've got to be somewhere at 11 o'clock.
Oh, let's call, Norma, can you call the prosecutor to come down?
She did.
Okay.
And I really need to get out of here.
Yeah, me too. I gotta get ready on my murder.
So they'll be down right away. Because we're supposed to start at 10:30, so they'll be here. And then, yes, they'll be here at 10:30. And we'll take these all up. Hello, see, there's a prosecutor. And then Meredith on Heflin.
What would you like to do with my client?
All right, Ms. Ferguson, this is what we're gonna do on Heflin. On Heflin, I want him set up with Zoom. And we will recall this for next week. Okay.
Any day but Thursday is good. I have jury duty on Thursday, so I can't guarantee where I shall be. And I was already bumped once.
All right. So Norma, let's put this then on the 23rd for the morning.
I'll come in person.
All right, so it's exactly at 9.
Are you gonna be able to confirm with him if he's on?
Yeah, I can log into the Zoom and go out in the hall, but I'll be over here for other cases, so I'll be in person. I'll try and have a Zoom with him before then to ask him what his problem is. He's got some,
And then if you see him before then and you determine he has some mental
I'll
health
follow
issues,
motion.
and then we will cancel the appearance.
Okay, let me call my office right now and tell them to set that up. And I'll pull Ranji's file.
And then Juan Carranza.
Yes, Judge, we're here and we're ready actually to chat with you about that.
Okay, sure. The last time we were here, it was DNA.
Yes, correct. So. this-
Oh, don't touch the equipment.
The, the state provided the DPS, DNA documentation that we needed.
Okay,
I sent it to my expert in Houston.
Mhm.
He has told me that and acknowledged to me yesterday that he has received the packet.
Mhm.
But he needs like another 2 weeks to go through because he also asked for some police reports and some other things. So that's where we are right now.
all right. So I'm going to give you one. Has the state made an offer or no?
You know, Judge, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know whether they have or not.
All right, Norma, can you get somebody down here from Family Violence?
Did they give you an offer? Did we have it? Okay, and we got an offer and we rejected it? Okay. So
Okay, so we already have the offer.
we have done that.
All right, so this is what we're going to do. I'm going to recall this back because you're saying your person needs 2 weeks. All right, Ms. Ferguson, on this case, recall this in 3 weeks, please. And that will be your plea deadline date.
Got it. That's great.
February 12th.
February 12th, that's fine.
Yes. All right, is there anything else that's needed?
No, Judge.
All right, so no other discovery? You think you have it all?
I think I have it all, Judge. It's just unless my expert comes up and says UPS is missing pages or something like that, some crazy thing that comes up, but I will certainly inform the court immediately if that happens.
All right. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Kevin Carell. You may want to call your attorney.
He said he'll be here to check next.
Okay.
month.
And then because we're recessing 5 minutes before 11.
Okay.
And then we're waiting for Joanne Eckel. Mr. Piker is conferring. All right, John, Renee Gardia. Renee Gardia. All right, could I see the file on Renee Gardia? But Sean, I always answer every email before I leave, and then when I come back,
I understand it. Exactly what you need, Judge.
I'm like, why is this here? And I answered emails at 7 p.m. So who is sending emails after 7 p.m.? I don't know.
Sometimes I get a few from Norma.
I'm always working. My dog.
I'm like, oh my goodness, still working.
You know that, I think it's in this court, the one with Manny and Eddie, it's the dog bite case that I got to put in second chair on. No, that court.
Hello, okay.
226, that's right. Okay, I'll go by there. Oh,
Yeah. So I just want to see. Take something on this, if he's going, I want to know what his offer is over there, because maybe there's. Not together. Okay. It's a joke. So, being, like, he even tweets on this today, he's gonna get sent over there, so I'd rather figure something out, it's not super serious. I don't need. I put that guy's name, so you don't cross call. Oh, this is their case, we got done for this.
Hello.
I don't think it is something.
Those were the zebra or zebra, as I like to say. We've been embracing the mob wife aesthetic all week, so that's what I was going for yesterday. And had a horrible funny bomber on earlier, so.
Oh, wow.
Mob wife look is good, so I gotta get it while it's hot.
Yeah.
We had a compliment name.
Oh, wow.
Good, so I actually reduced the case today. Because this lady didn't pay for her Manny and Petty, and then she like acted really poorly when I tried to get her payment, so it was great, so.
Can I approach on Ranji, Bergen Zavala and how that affects?
Yes. All right, Mr. Bergen Zavala. All right, so where are we on the case?
Judge, my client originally had 3 cases. He only has 1 now, and I talked to the prosecutor this morning. I gave them some information. I've obtained the name of the prosecutor in Guadalupe County who has his case, and my client is hopeful that we can work out a global offer. I think that'd be in his best interest. If you could give me a short reset to talk to the people in Guadalupe County and see if one way or the other we can work out this case, that would be good. I don't need very long, maybe 2 weeks.
How much are you asking for? 2 weeks?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I've already left a message with their boss, so I should get a call back.
All right, so what we'll do is I'll give you 3 weeks.
Okay.
And Mr. Bergen, if she finds out something sooner than then, you can always ask to be put on the docket sooner.
Sure. And as soon as I get an offer, I'll schedule a Zoom with my client and we'll decide if he's going to take it and then we can come set it for a plea. Sure.
All right.
Thank you, Judge.
Ms. Ferguson, 3 weeks, please.
The 12th.
All right. We'll come back on February 12th. But like I said, if your attorney were to find out something today and she wants to have it brought back on Monday, we'll be able to do that.
Okay.
Do you have any questions about anything? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
You're
See you.
welcome.
I'll let you know.
have a sleep in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'll go first.
Here's the fellow Montez. All right, could I see a prosecutor on Renee Gordia, please? We're gonna go on the record. Court is calling 2023 CR 3278, State of Texas versus Renee Michelle Gordia. Could I have state announce?
Hank Wilkes for the state, Your Honor.
All right, this hearing was scheduled yesterday. The defendant did appear by Zoom. The defendant was instructed to appear in court. The defendant was required to appear in person yesterday, but did not. And the court allowed the defendant to appear by Zoom so we can discover the reasons for her not being present in court. Defendant is not present today. Deputy Laura, did you make an announcement?
Yes, Your Honor, there's someone in the hallway.
State?
Your Honor, state asked for a bond forfeiture.
All right, that will be granted and defendant will be remanded without bond. If she makes an appearance, the court will reconsider.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. See the follow Mejia, please. Thank you. Oh. Joanne, what is happening with your case today? Okay, all right. That's gonna be a plea. Good morning. How's it going? Oh, yeah. Sherry Cooper, that's on the docket today, correct?
Your Honor, it was supposed to be on the docket, but I don't think Norma was notified. I think she already left for the day. So, but her attorney knew to notify her to come today.
Yeah, no, it's on the docket today. Because I have it written down. And Borrego is supposed to be the 22nd. So I need to file on Sherry Cooper.
And Judge, And I think that contested hearing is supposed to be finishing up this afternoon at 3. At the hood. The contested one that we started yesterday.
Oh, I thought he said he would be here at 10.
No, you had told him at 9, so he was here also early this morning.
Oh, no, I told him 10. Because he was saying, maybe you'll be here. Well, I told everybody 10:30 and he said, well, I'm gonna stop by at 10 because maybe, people will be here at 10.
I think they said the 10 o'clock was to go through the redacted to see about getting stuff redacted.
Okay, all right, we'll take care of it. It's all fluid.
I mean, it's nothing.
And we'll take up Miss Sherry Cooper.
She's already at passport.
Oh, she is?
Well, no.
You wish it to.
Okay. All right, well, she's not here and I'll notate in the file, she's not here. All right, there we go. All right, last night, my mom told me, she's like, I found another good cartoon. And she said, My Happy Marriage. And I said, Mom, I watched that. She said, My Happy Marriage. Cinderella didn't have a hard life based on My Happy Marriage. I'm like, I know.
Yeah. So we're good to go.
So we're going to take up these pleas, then we'll have the jury brought in.
Sorry, or you? Oh, I mean, I love accommodating people so much. I mean, I'll do whatever I can to make sure you keep the haircut. Because I'm very sensitive to the haircut.
It takes me about.
Yeah, I mean, really?
I'm accommodating his schedule, with your permission. To
Yeah.
take you guys.
Why? For fun. For plausible deniability. She wants it to accidentally go on. I do.
Oh,
What
we know
a
that.
novel idea.
Right. Yeah.
Deputy Laura, protect me at all costs. My mom has already said, if any of her children are in danger, she will not take a plane, she will not drive because she feels that she will be able to get here quicker if she ran. So, and you know what?
Super speed.
And Deputy Laura, don't do Dragnet. In Dragnet, they would say the names have been changed to protect the innocent. Don't change any names. You tell her when she gets here, you tell her who it was and tell her that Anna approved it.
Yep.
Right, right. If she's
I have
interested,
it too. What's that?
I know, right? Yeah.
So we're gonna start two.
Oh.
We're gonna start two.
Yeah, no, and he's,
Oh, those are-
yeah, and he's one of all the safety people. And that they were all working order when he was handling and talking.
As long as I'm not.
We need to check with.
I was looking at that pre-trial right now.
Not that I'm. I do have.
That's
Tina.
But let's use the one we got.
I don't know.
Well, if you know, tell me what to do. Right? Yeah.
I don't know where it's at.
So that's something we got.
But then we're gonna do-
For this guy's in house.
Yes.
So it's not-
For New Year's, I finally had my first like.
Who was it?
And wasn't, and after that, but we're like, I'm not, no way.
Was it the guy?
Like, do you have any idea how much it took?
They had that.
It's funny, like.
Yeah, you're right.
I bet Zach has seen that.
Oh, no.
Oh, I'll give you a chance to break because I know you have to get this stuff.
Have you seen the Godfather?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
Okay.
What happens in the life?
In the Godfather.
Yeah.
And do not give us anything that anybody would know from clips.
Look, if I do this, all right, think of it like me making an offer you can't refuse.
Let me ask you this. Who is Fredo?
He's a character in the movie.
Yeah, but what is his relationship to everybody?
Well, he's related to a lot of them in many different ways.
Okay,
It's
so,
hard to know whose perspective.
so let me just tell you, he has not watched The Godfather.
No. Your Honor,
Everybody knows Fredo.
absolutely.
Slapped around, he was just kidding with me.
The gun was hidden.
That's what she was looking
The gun was hidden in the bathroom under by the toilet seat. That's pretty good.
No.
By the toilet.
Wrong.
Behind
It was
the,
the bathroom, right?
behind the water
His-
closet.
Here's the thing,
It was in the
I
bathroom.
don't,
Wasn't about, but not when.
yeah, so here's the thing. I don't believe he's watched The Godfather. We now know he has not watched Warriors.
No, Your Honor, come on. This is
We
not
we
fair.
know he has not watched Never Ending Story.
Well, it's never ending. It's hard to finish. I started it, but it's hard to finish. And you know what my
Wait.
favorite Western is, Judge? I don't know if you've ever even seen this movie yourself. My personal favorite is Once Upon a Time in the West.
Oh, please, you have not even seen it. Next, he's gonna tell me he hasn't watched Princess Bride.
He's probably just Googling obscure like Western movies.
I'd say that, look at his face, he has not watched Princess Bride.
You haven't seen Princess Bride?
With Andre the Giant.
No.
No?
People know who the people who are in there.
He's in that movie.
He is, but that doesn't mean he's watched the movie.
Fredo's in there. You know?
I will tell you, inconceivable.
This is my last day in this court, Your Honor. It's been a pleasure, you know.
Princess Bride was a very good
Die
movie.
now, Buttercup.
Aim the gun at me when you do the demonstration.
That's.
I mean, wow. So now we're just gonna have to have movie days.
Just go out to the
Judge.
jury room during lunch.
I mean,
Put a
he
movie
hasn't,
on for Zach.
he hasn't even watched John Wick. Next, he's gonna say Ten Commandments. I don't know what that is.
I've only watched the first 9. Oh.
Yeah, she's not gonna get you.
No.
I will tell you, every Easter we will watch Ten Commandments. And little known fact, Yul Brynner had hair, but Yul Brynner looked great without the hair. If you see him with the hair, you're just like, is that Yul Brynner? But Ten Commandments, as far as great movies made, it is right up there.
Charlton Heston.
Oh, everybody knows he was in there.
I'll be right back.
As a fan of the movie, that's how I know that, Judge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna quiz you.
I don't think I'm gonna do very good.
Very efficient.
On Julian.
See, Piper, now you don't have to come back. This is.
Thanks.
Made
I
his offer
appreciate
today
Sure.
within the realm.
In between.
Yes. Kevin Carell.
There.
Kevin Carell?
Korea?
I'm mispronouncing it. Curiel? All right. You should always correct me if I mispronounce your name, okay? All right, so today is the plea deadline date. What are we doing?
Judge, an offer has been made. We anticipate that we're close to a resolution. Mr. Curiel has asked me a number of questions. I was wondering if I could just get a little bit of time to.
How much time are you asking for?
A couple of weeks, 3 weeks.
All right, Ms. Ferguson. Let's call this back in 3 weeks. That will be your final plea deadline date. On that day, you need to let the court know whether or not you're accepting the offer. Do you understand?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, what date? All right, we'll be back on February 12th. If you'll sign the reset form, you are excused.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Let's go have a seat.
Yeah.
Robert Montez. Oh, can I have a stamp for a plea, please? Oh, that's okay.
Gotta fly everything up to 5.
Oh, we did the first.
But thank you.
Court is calling 2023 CR 6743, State of Texas versus Robert C. Montez. Could I have parties announced for the record for the state?
Hank Wilkes, State Your Honor.
Defense,
Ed Piker for Mr. Montez.
are you Mr. Montez?
Your Honor.
Counsel, have you received all the discovery? Did you review it with your client?
I did.
Court will find that the state is in compliance with discovery probation. This is an application. Mr. Montez, I'm showing you what's entitled Application for Deferred Adjudication or Community Supervision. Did you review that with your attorney? Did you understand it? Did you sign it?
Your Honor.
Going to show you what's entitled True Bill of Indictment. Did you review that with your attorney? Did you understand it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Counsel, do you waive the reading of the indictment?
We do.
State, are you proceeding on the indictment as presented? Mr. Montez, I'm showing you what's entitled Court Admonishments and Defendants Waivers and Admonitions, Affidavit of Admonitions. Did you review that document with your attorney? Did you understand it? Did you sign it in all the appropriate places?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you understand you're charged with the offense of possession of a controlled substance, penalty group 1 grams to 4 grams? That's a third-degree felony. The range of punishment is anywhere from 2 to 10 years in prison and up to $10,000 fine. Did you understand?
Yes, Your Honor.
If you have a plea with the state, the court does not have to follow your plea. If for any reason the court does not follow your plea and gives you more than you bargained for, the fact that you entered a plea will not be used against you and you will be allowed to withdraw your plea. Did you understand?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you understand you have a right to jury trial, a right for you or your attorney to cross-examine and confront any witnesses the state would call and the right to remain silent?
Your Honor.
Did you understand by entering this plea bargain agreement, you were giving up those rights?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you intend to give up those rights and enter into a plea in this case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you understand if the court were to grant your application for deferred adjudication, if for any reason your deferred adjudication were revoked, the court could find you guilty and sentence you up to 10 years in the prison?
Yes, Your Honor.
Counsel, has your client been able to provide you with any defenses?
He has.
Do you believe he has a rational as well as a factual understanding of the charges against him?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe he's currently competent and was legally sane at the time of the offense?
I do.
Mr. Montez, has anyone threatened you, coerced you, or placed you in fear to get you to enter the plea?
No.
Anyone promised you anything other than the plea? Are you satisfied with the way you've been represented?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are you a U.S. citizen?
Yes, ma'am.
Court will find that defendant has knowingly and voluntarily waived his right to jury trial. Showing you the plea bargain page. Did you review that with your attorney? Did you understand it?
Yes, Your Honor.
According to the plea, there's a $500 fine and the state is recommending deferred adjudication. Did you understand that to be the plea?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense?
Yes.
State?
Yes, Your Honor.
Showing you the waiver of appeal paragraph. Did you review that with your attorney? Did you understand it? Did you sign it in both places?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you understand by signing that you're waiving your right to appeal? The only items that can be appealed are written pretrial motions that have been filed, heard, and ruled upon by the court. Did you understand?
Yes, Your Honor.
Counsel, have there been any such motions?
No.
Outside the agreement, the state is requesting that your deferred adjudication be for a term of 5 years. There be a TAP evaluation and 150 hours community service restitution. Did you understand those are recommendations from the state and the court does not have to follow those recommendations?
Yes, Your Honor.
Then to the offenses charged, how do you plead? Guilty, not guilty, or no contest?
Contest.
State any evidence?
Your Honor. States Exhibit 1 in the attachments.
We have reviewed it. No objection.
Mr. Montez, I'm showing you what's entitled waiver and consent to stipulation of testimony and stipulations. Did you review that document with your attorney? Did you understand it? Did you sign it in all the appropriate places?
Yes, Your Honor.
Again, did you understand you have a right to jury trial, a right for you or your attorney to cross-examine and confront any witnesses the state would call and the right to remain silent?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you understand that today the state will be presenting evidence in the form of witnesses' statements and police reports? But most importantly, there will be no live testimony. Did you understand?
Your Honor.
Court will find that defendant has knowingly and voluntarily waived and consented to stipulation of testimony and stipulations. Court will accept into evidence states exhibits 1 and attachments, and the court will review the same. All right, after reviewing states exhibits 1 and attachments, the court will find there is sufficient evidence to find you guilty. The court will defer finding of guilt as you've applied for deferred adjudication. Are you proceeding with sentencing?
Yes, ma'am.
Anything you wish to say on behalf of your client?
Judge, at the time that he had the heroin on him, he had gone through two different deaths very close in his family. As a matter of fact, he was at his mother's house mowing the lawn in order to prepare it for a funeral that day or the next day or somewhere in there. I have talked to him about setting his mind to, doing better. It did seem like he has a plan. He does have several jobs that he can go to, working at a pizza place. And also he is a barber by trade. And he does have a place to live. He will be living with his mother. And so he does have a plan. And so I think he could have had a straight probation and not worried about defer, but he says, no, I'm done with this whole thing. I want to try for that dismissal.
Okay.
And so he made a conscious decision on that.
All right. So here's, I have a few questions for you. The first question I have is with regards to living with your mom, have you called her? Does she want you to live with her?
Because I've already spoken to her and she was not aware of this court date. But cause I was supposed to go to court on the 9th and I guess they got rescheduled, whatever.
Okay.
But she told me as long as, I'm doing the right thing, but she doesn't want no type of drug, anything at the house, And so as long as I got my head right and doing the right thing, she doesn't want me going home.
All right. Do you have any children?
No, ma'am.
So have you talked to anyone to address the issues that you felt with regards to, I guess, close members of family or death in your family?
I mean, months prior to me getting out from CDC, I lost my father. Then a month later, my mother, my grandma. So when I got out, I was in a emotional state of depression, and
And sometimes you just need somebody,
I was bothered and didn't really speak to nobody, but
well, sometimes you need somebody to talk to, right? And sometimes it needs to be somebody who's not family or not a friend. And it's okay to talk to a therapist about what you're feeling and what you're going through. You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So do you have these questions I'm going to ask you? It's related to the court costs. Excuse me, to the clerk, how much are court costs for this offense?
It'll come 305.
$305? All right. So do you have any bank accounts or anything to pay the $305?
Not right now. I mean, I got like $80 on my books.
Okay, so,
But within the first week, I'm pretty sure.
all right, would you be able to pay that if they set up installments for you to pay it?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
All right. And I just ask these questions. I know sometimes when people appear before me, it's sort of like when you're borrowing money somebody and you desperately need $1,000 and you tell them, oh yeah, I'll be able to pay that back in 2 weeks. Because in your mind, you're saying, okay, if I tell them I really won't be able to pay it back until 6 months, they probably won't loan it to me. So let me do this. So I don't want to put a financial pressure or burden on you,
Yes, ma'am.
but I just wanted to know if you would be able to pay
yes.
that.
In installments, yes.
Yes, okay. So probation, he can pay that in installments. And if you could figure that out for him, what they'll do is your probation officer figure out what your income is, and then they'll set up installment payments for you. And if you feel like if those installment payments, it comes to the point where you can't pay them because maybe it's either I pay this payment or either I lose where I'm staying, just let them know. And if you feel like they're not addressing it, you can always come back to the court.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so how often were you using heroin?
I was using daily.
Okay. All right, thank you for being honest with me because I'm going to put you on probation, but I'm trying to set up conditions so that you'll be successful
Yes,
because I want you to be successful. All right, and what's with the tattoo? What is that a tattoo of?
Oh, Medusa.
Oh, you're in mythology, okay. And on the chest?
Oh, it's just a whole bunch of skulls in San Antonio going across.
Okay. All right, why do you have San Antonio going across your chest? Okay, so this is what we're gonna do. In this case, I'm gonna do 5 years deferred adjudication. If you complete everything early, you can be off early.
Yes, ma'am.
There's gonna be a $500 fine that will be probated. We'll do a gang evaluation. Felony drug court evaluation. I'm gonna have you do the felony drug court evaluation while in custody. Be honest with them the way you've been honest with me, because that's a good program to help you with your drug habit, okay? And
Well, as far as, I mean, as far as the gang evaluation, I mean, I'm an ex,
no, they'll just look into it. Yeah. If you qualify for felony drug court will accept you, and then they'll give you your conditions. Right. And the gang evaluation, felony drug court and TEP evaluation, that will be in custody. And felony drug court, because today is Friday, they won't be able to get to you today, but they'll probably see you by next week. So just expect them to come next week and let them know what your drug habit is. There's to be regular reporting by Zoom or in person, random, regular UAs. What's your mom's name?
Veronica Castro.
The defendant is to reside with Veronica Castro.
Yeah.
You're not to leave that location unless you clear it with the court. You understand? I'm going to want field visits 1 time per month until he's in treatment. Do a MIC evaluation as well. Proof of employment within 45 days of release. There's to be no employment as a home health care provider or with minors. 150 hours of community service restitution. The court is not going to waive those. Probation, is there anything else he needs? Well, if felony drug court finishes with their evaluation and accepts him, then they can decide if they want that in custody or not. But for us, he can do that out of custody. All right, is there anything else you need from the court to be successful? All right, I'm going to show you what's entitled Trial Court Certification of Defendant's Rights to Appeal. Did you review that with your attorney? Did you understand it? And I need his signature.
Good job.
All right, did you review that with your attorney? Did you understand it?
No right of appeal, no right of appeal. It's over today, you can't change it.
All right, did you review that document with your attorney? Did you understand it? Because this is a plea bargain agreement, because I followed your plea bargain agreement, and because you waive your right to appeal, you do not have the court's permission to appeal. Do you understand? And Ms. Abrams, the other thing I'm going to want is no unsupervised contact with minors. So what that means is you're not allowed to babysit, okay? All right. All right. Is there anything else you need?
No, yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thanks.
Good luck.
All right. Your client did not show.
I've been checking now.
Okay. All right. So I issued a bond forfeiture. Okay. If she makes an appearance or shows up, just let me know. Or if she is in mental health treatment, let me know.
She has her last screening with, I think it's a psych appointment on the 25th. I'll encourage her to show up to court Monday morning.
Okay.
Check in, see what happens.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
All right. You too. They're going to do a plea. Okay, sure. All right. Thank you. Deputy Laura, you're good with that. You cut the camera off. You're so awesome. Yeah. I appreciate that. Ray and Victoria, after we do this plea, we'll start back up with the trial. Yes.
But then, two.
Sure. Just arrange, with all the way y'all want to bring him back, so I'll just send them to you today and we can bring him back.
Okay, and because I just was, I tried to see if she could use Zoom, if it's supposed to be, she's a CPA or something like that, and they're doing all, I guess, taxes. Thank you.
No problem.
Norma, on this case, I figure we'll take our break, our lunch break, probably at 1:30. Dinah, on this case, we'll take our lunch break at 1:30.
What?
That's Ally Jackson.
Oh, sorry, Allie.
See how she apologized to Ally with you? It was like.
That's what made me laugh. Oh, sorry, Allie. But that. That, no. It's okay, at one point I was definitely scribbling, so.
Oh, that's all.
She said she was only.
My naturalized. It was a Kelly.
He goes away, he doesn't get a tan.
Mhm.
Those are down. If I get old, I can't be hanging out with someone.
Yes. I'm sorry. Mhm. And then you can turn it over. It has each one, and the ones that are admitted, I highlighted. Diana, you ready? All right, court is calling 2022 CR 4932A, State of Texas versus Joshua Adam Mejia. Can I have parties announced for the record for the state?
Jason Carahan, Your Honor.
Defense? And are you Mr. Mejia?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to show you what's entitled True Bill of Indictment. Did you review that document with your attorney? Did you understand it?
Yes, ma'am.
Counsel, do you waive the reading of the indictment?
I do.
State, are you proceeding on the indictment as presented?
Yeah, Your Honor, we're proceeding on count one alone. I'm waiving the remainder of counts.
Any objection?
No objection, Judge.
Mr. Mejia, I'm going to show you what's entitled Court Admonishments. Thank you. I'm going to show you what's entitled Court Admonishments and Defendants Waivers and Affidavit of Admonitions. Did you review that document with your attorney? Did you understand it? Did you sign it in all the appropriate places?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand you're charged with the offense of murder in count one? The range of punishment for that offense is anywhere from 5 to 99 years or life in prison and up to a $10,000 fine. Did you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
If you have a plea with the state, the court does not have to follow your plea. For any reason, the court does not follow your plea and gives you more than you bargained for, the fact that you entered a plea will not be used against you and you will be allowed to withdraw your plea. Did you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand you have a right to jury trial, a right for you or your attorney to cross-examine and confront any witnesses the state would call, and the right to remain silent?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand by entering this plea, you were giving up those rights?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you intend to give up those rights and enter into a plea in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Counsel, has your client been able to provide you with any defenses?
We've discussed it, Judge, and he's been able to go over the facts of the case and assist me in those defenses.
Do you believe he has a rational as well as a factual understanding of the charges against him?
I do.
Do you believe he's currently competent and was legally sane at the time of the offense? Mr. Mejia, has anyone threatened you, coerced you, or placed you in fear to get you to enter the plea?
No, ma'am.
Anyone promised you anything other than the plea?
No, ma'am.
Are you satisfied with the way you've been represented?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you a U.S. citizen?
Yes, ma'am.
Court will find that defendant has knowingly and voluntarily waived his right to jury trial. Showing you the plea bargain page. Did you review that page with your attorney? Did you understand it?
Yes, ma'am.
According to the plea, the state is proceeding on count one. Punishment is to be assessed at 20 years in the prison. There's a $2,500 fine, affirmative finding of deadly weapon. There are no applications and they're taking in consideration 718417. Did you understand that to be the plea?
Yes, ma'am.
Defense is at the plea.
Yes, Judge.
State is at the plea.
It is, Your Honor.
Showing you the waiver of appeal paragraph. Did you review that paragraph with your attorney? Did you understand it? Did you sign it in both places?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand by signing that you're waiving your right to appeal? The only items that can be appealed are written pretrial motions that have been filed, heard, and ruled upon by the court. Did you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Counsel, have there been any such motions?
No, Judge.
Then to count one, how do you plead? Guilty, not guilty, or no contest?
No contest.
All right. Counsel, with regards to the discovery in this case, the state has stated off the record that they believe they've turned over all discovery to you. Is that correct, state?
Yes, it is, Your Honor.
All right. But counsel, because the discovery document, the acknowledgement is so long, you just want to make sure that everything that is in there that you have, is that correct?
Yes, Judge.
All right. And with that being said, do you still wish the court to continue with this plea?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Mr. Mejia, I'm showing you what's entitled waiver and consent to stipulation of testimony and stipulations. Did you review that document with your attorney? Did you understand it? Did you sign it in all the appropriate places?
Yes, ma'am.
Again, did you understand you have a right to jury trial, a right for you or your attorney to cross-examine and confront any witnesses the state would call, and the right to remain silent?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand that today the state will be presenting evidence in the form of witnesses' statements and police reports, but most importantly, there will be no live testimony? Did you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Court will find that defendant has knowingly and voluntarily waived and consented to stipulation of testimony and stipulations. Court will accept into evidence states exhibits 1 and attachments, and the court will review the same. All right, after reviewing states exhibits 1 and attachments, the court will find there is sufficient evidence to find you guilty, and the court will find you guilty. Mr. Mejia, we're gonna reschedule sentencing to make sure that the acknowledgement of discovery, your counsel has all of that. Although she believes she has all of it, I'm giving her a chance to double check, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we'll come back on sentencing on a different date. Which date, Ms. Ferguson? All right, is January 26th?
Fine with it.
Okay.
That's good with me, Judge.
All right, so we'll be back on January 26th, and at that time, the court will hear any evidence that anyone else wants to present. And I'll make a decision on whether or not I'll accept the plea. You understand?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Diana, are you ready to switch over? Are we really in room 3? See, last time.
Something, I have to show it to the.
Y'all want me to turn
Okay.
this way or
Because I was like,
have y'all used this yet?
I can't
Okay.
find her any room.
I was making sure.
And I was doubting my steel trap mind. I'm like, I'm pretty sure she said room 8, but she's not in that room. All right, so you say room 3, but you didn't put 187th on it, did you? You just put the date? Okay. Oh, no, I just see the date.
Yeah.
You can just go any other one, like, for now, you can drop it off. Okay.
Just showing that you were the person.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. No problem. Have a good day. Don't lose the Hawaiian joy. Yeah.
Did the try last night.
Exactly. So then it's inside 30, which had 30, whatever in there.
30, yes, 30 A and 30 B. 30 A and
Yeah.
30 B.
So these two are marked as 30B1 and 30B2
30 B one.
and 30B2.
No, no, no. Thirty B two.
So everyone, the plan is for us to take our lunch break at 1:30. Ray, you're looking at me like, what?
Really hungry by 12.
Oh, no, everybody should have had breakfast. I think that sometimes we think we're starving and we're really not starving. Yeah. And I'm going to pick up fruit today. No, I'm just gonna pick some up because I'm not doing sugar anymore. So I'm just living off of nature's candy. When I want something sweet, it's nature's candy. No. No, usually what ends up happening when I go cold turkey on sugars, as far as sodas and all of that, I usually do it for like 4 months. And then the first time that I have a soda, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is too sweet. This is all sugar. So, but I'm not going back. Yeah.
Every once in a while, I want a big red soda, specifically big red soda, not the red flash. And then I take the first drink and my mouth so big. Just the sugar and syrup.
I must be the only one in Texas. You know what I'm not a fan of? Big Red, Dr. Pepper, you can add that to the list. And brisket.
You can't go back to the museum.
I'm sorry, I'm not a brisket fan. And whenever we have some sort of Thanksgiving or Christmas here, and we decide what we want, when people say brisket, I'm like, okay, but
No.
And Dr. Pepper,
No.
No, ma'am, you're not from here.
I'm not from here. But you know, here's the funny thing. My mom will drink Big Red sometime, and my brothers. I'm the only one. I'm like, I said, I don't understand this.
But now that might not happen. If the state rests before 1:30, I mean,
Oh, then we're gonna take our break. You have a break to get your witnesses.
figure out who's going first, second, and how.
Yes. No, I always try to figure out from the state or have the state tell the defense when they anticipate resting. So the defense will have a chance to get their witnesses.
People that I think they all expect.
Okay, well, we'll make sure we take our recess, and then give you a chance to get witnesses here.
Sounds like you're a judge.
So I won't need it.
Okay.
No, she doesn't. Oh, yeah, which one scissors?
And state, who's your witness?
The next one is going to be Mary Hess.
All right, can we have them on the stand, please?
No.
From what I can hear in the lineup, all the jurors may be here. And then, Mr. Vega, if you will, I'll let the jury know that there's been I don't know if y'all want me to let them know there's been that co-counsel had to leave on a family matter. And that Mr. Vega is going to stand in, and I'll just ask them if they know Mr. Vega, and I'll allow you to introduce yourself to the jury.
That's fine, Judge.
All right, does anyone have any problem with me letting them know that there was a medical issue and counsel had to leave? Okay. Because you never know what to say. You don't want somebody to think that somebody left because they're like,
Yeah, lost interest.
yeah, I lost it. You got other things to do. There's a cartoon on, you know?
All the jurors are here. I have them in line.
All right.
Ready to go.
All right, the court is calling 2023 CR 2677, State of Texas versus David Duenas. Could I have parties announced for the record for the state?
Ally Jackson for the state.
Oh, come on through. For the defense.
Raymond Martinez.
All right, and are you Mr. Duenas? All right, everyone, please be seated. We'll bring the jury in.
You need scissors. You're looking at them like, oh no.
Scissors are here if you need
Oh,
them.
yeah. This is good.
I'll keep them there.
All rise for the jury.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we begin with the state's next witness, defense counsel who was sitting with Mr. Martinez had a family issue, so they had to leave. So there's a new attorney that's going to be sitting there, and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself to you.
Morning, I'm Christian Vega. I'm going to be helping out Mr. Martinez today.
All right, does any of the jurors know Mr. Vega? So everybody's shaking their head no, is that correct? All right, thank you. State, call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Mary Hess.
All right, could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, you can lower your hand, state your name for the record, please.
My name is Mary Christina Hess.
All right, and just make sure you keep your voice up so that the jurors and the court reporter can hear. All right, state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Hess, would you mind spelling your name for the record?
Yes, that's Merry. And Christina is Christina. Hess is Hess.
Thank you. And then what do you do for a living?
I'm employed at the Bexar County Criminal Investigation Laboratory.
And what are your duties at the laboratory?
My duties are that I am a forensic scientist, and that means that I analyze evidence that is submitted to the laboratory, and then I produce a report on my findings.
And how long have you been employed as a forensic scientist?
I've been employed since October 1st, 2013.
And what formal education do you have?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry from St. Mary's University.
And have you received any additional specialized training in the discipline of gunshot residue analysis?
Yes, I have.
And what training specific to gunshot residue, or GSR, if you will? What specific training for GSR have you received?
I received on-the-job training at the laboratory, which included reading articles as well as supervised casework and excuse me, demonstrating that I have passed proficiency tests or competency tests as well as written and oral tests.
And excuse me, just one moment. Are there any witnesses? Because I noticed some people have come in. Okay, all right, thank you. You may continue.
Now, ma'am, you mentioned proficiency testing.
Sorry, just may I pause for a second?
Yes. Oh, sure. All right, everyone, just give us a moment. So ladies and gentlemen, because the rule has been invoked, witnesses are not allowed in the courtroom. You're welcome. All right, you may continue.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, ma'am, you had mentioned some of the proficiency testing. Do you mind kind of going into that a little bit more?
So initially, when you're still in training and not authorized to do your own casework yet, that you would have to pass what's called a competency test, which is basically, a test with an unknown sample, or in this case, it would be a sample from a gunshot residue collection kit. I would have to analyze that and demonstrate that I can, find the results properly and produce the report properly as well. A proficiency test is for analysts that are already released for independent casework. That is something that we take every year, and it's provided by an external company, and it's basically the same thing. It's an unknown sample that you have to analyze and get correct based on the results provided by the company.
Yes, ma'am. And you said that was yearly?
Yes,
And is your laboratory accredited?
it is.
And is that accreditation recognized by the Texas Forensic Science Commission?
Yes,
And is that accreditation recognized and accepted nationally and internationally?
yes,
Now, ma'am, are you a licensed forensic analyst by the Texas Forensic Science Commission?
yes, I am.
And what did the licensing require?
The licensing required that I took an examination covering a variety of material put forth by the Texas Forensic Science Commission. And so that test has to initially be passed to obtain your license. And then to maintain your license, you have to do continuing forensic education hours, as well as have a proficiency test each year.
And ma'am, we've spoken a little bit about it in terms of your accreditation and background, but for gunshot residue, or again, GSR, can you describe what is GSR?
I have a visual aid if I may use it.
Please, yeah.
So gunshot residue, this is a model of a typical round of ammunition. Gunshot residue, or the primer gunshot residue, is what I'm primarily concerned with, which is found right here in this little gray area, called the primer cap. So what happens when you fire a weapon? The trigger is pulled and the firing pin will strike this little gray cap area right here, the primer cap. This primer cap contains shock-sensitive chemicals comprised of the elements lead, barium, and antimony. These shock-sensitive chemicals, once they're struck with the firing pin, create a very small explosion. That explosion leaks into the cartridge case area here, which contains gunpowder. So that gunpowder will ignite and the gases will expand. And those pressures and gases building up are what actually causes the bullet to be ejected from the barrel of a weapon. So the shock-sensitive chemicals from the primer cap vaporize very quickly because of the heat, and then they will condense back down and form particles that are ejected out of any openings in the weapon. These particles will then deposit on surrounding surfaces, hands, clothing, near and around where the gun was fired.
Thank you. And more specifically, what is primer GSR?
Primer GSR are those chemicals that I just talked about in the primer cap, this gray area right here. That is comprised of the elements lead, barium, and antimony. And so when I am doing my analysis, I am looking for all three of those elements together or two of those elements together.
And ma'am, what is a GSR kit and what is a GSR kit designed to collect?
I have another visual aid if I can use that.
Please.
A GSR kit is basically a kit that has two sampling devices in it, usually two. It can have four sometimes. They look like this. They sometimes are pre-labeled right hand and left hand. They contain in the cap area here an aluminum disc with a double-sided adhesive tape, which is then lightly dabbed to collect the sample from either somebody's hands or sometimes clothing can be sampled as well, or surfaces, sometimes vehicles can be sampled as well. And these are then placed back onto the plastic cylinder, put into an envelope, and then submitted to the laboratory.
And ma'am, have you testified before as an expert witness in the scope or discipline of gunshot residue?
Yes.
On how many occasions?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I know my total testimonies because I have done drug analysis. Initially, I was trained in drug analysis. That was from 2013. And then in 2021, I became cross-trained in GSR as well.
And does that expert testimony you've provided in the past, does that include courts in this county and Bear County?
Yes. And I'm sorry, I don't remember if I provided an actual number, but it's around 30 testimonies.
Thank you. With respect to GSR testing, what can this analysis reveal?
With respect to GSR analysis, it can tell you if an object was near, around a weapon when it was fired, or if a person was near or around or discharged a weapon. It can't tell you that definitively that that person discharged the firearm, but it can tell you that they were possibly a person that discharged a firearm. They were near or around the vicinity of a discharging firearm.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Ma'am, I'm showing you what's been pre-marked as State's Exhibit 30. It's, of course, a bag from the laboratory. But therein, I'm showing you what's been not offered yet, but pre-marked as State's Exhibit 30B1 and 30B2. Do you recognize these two items? And I guess we can take them one at a time. I apologize. Do you recognize item 30B1?
And counsel, if you want to move forward, you can.
Yes.
And what is it?
This is a piece of evidence for an item of clothing that was sampled at our laboratory.
Is it a GSR kit or an element of the analysis for GSR testing?
Yes, it is an envelope that contains sampling devices from the laboratory.
And how do you recognize it?
I recognize it by the criminal investigation laboratory number, which is a unique identifier that is assigned to each case that comes into the laboratory.
And what is the CIL, the number that you just referenced?
Yes, the CIL number is 22-05364.
And then, ma'am, do you have a copy of your report up there with you as well in case you need to refresh your memory?
Yes.
And at the top of your report, is there a CIL number?
Yes.
Would you mind reading that number out as well?
That is 22-05364.
And so do those numbers match?
Yes.
And then would you mind reading, again, just taking it, just this first one, 30B1 do you mind kind of reading what the descriptor is, just for the members of the jury, kind of maybe a quarter way down on that envelope?
Yes, this in quotation says P-GSR stubs taken from black t-shirt.
And Your Honor, at this time, the state would offer State's Exhibit 30B1 into evidence pending any defense objection.
Is that the one she just read?
Yes.
No objection.
All right, State's Exhibit 30B1 is admitted without objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. And ma'am, we're gonna get to 30B1 in more detail, but just of course, taking it step by step. Now with 30B2, do you recognize this envelope?
Yes,
And how do you recognize it?
again, I recognize it by the criminal investigation laboratory number, as well as my initials, the date, and the Bear County Criminal Investigation Laboratory tape.
And so, ma'am, with respect to the number on the envelope, would you mind reading it out loud?
The CIL number,
Yes, exactly.
that number is 22-05364.
And ma'am, I know you've already done this previously, but would you mind rereading the number at the top of your report?
That number is 22-05364.
And do those numbers match?
Yes,
And now, ma'am, again, you did this previously with 30B1, but now with respect to 30B2, would you mind kind of reading the descriptor that is, again, maybe a quarter to a third of the way down on that envelope?
yes. It is quotation marks P-GSR stubs taken from gray sweatpants, end quotes.
And Your Honor, at this time, the state would offer State's Exhibit 30B2 into evidence, of course, pending any defense objection.
Objection.
All right. State's Exhibit 30B2 is admitted without objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, ma'am, did you conduct an analysis of the GR kit with respect to this matter?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Did you conduct an analysis with respect to this CIL, with respect to this criminal case?
I did test one kit. And then there were 2 items of clothing that were also submitted to the laboratory with the, under that CIL number, which is what I tested.
Your Honor, may I approach again?
Yes.
Ma'am, I'm showing you what's been marked and admitted previously as State's Exhibit 30A. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
And can you please describe what Exhibit 30A is?
Exhibit 30A is a GSR collection kit from Arrowhead Forensics, which is a brand that agencies can purchase. It's a assembled kit that some agencies will use to collect samples and submit to the laboratory.
And is there a CIL number on that?
Yes,
And what is that number?
that number is 22-05364.
And of course, just for clarity, does that match the number at the top of your report?
Yes,
So, ma'am, if we can just maybe walk through your report a little bit. You have a beginning section of your report titled Evidence Received, if you
Yes.
will. Do you mind kind of just going through, when you're drafting these reports and kind of marking down evidence received, what are you demonstrating? What are you writing?
what I'm demonstrating in this portion of my laboratory report is basically an inventory of the evidence that was received and its contents.
And you kind of go into kind of halfway down the page, it says results and conclusions. But that first sentence, it talks about examination of items. Can you go into EDX spectrometry? I cannot speak. Spectroscopy. Can you kind of go into the work, like that sentence and what the analysis starts with?
May I read the sentence?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the sentence says the tested items were examined by scanning electron microscopy, SEM, and analyzed by energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, EDX. And this is just the instrumentation that is used to analyze these sampling devices that we receive in the laboratory. It is a very high-powered microscope that allows you to visualize microscopic particles that aren't visible with the naked eye. So the scanning electron microscope is one portion, and the energy dispersive X-ray is another portion of the instrument. It's basically two different types of instrumentation combined.
And ma'am, kind of later on in the report, just working through it chronologically, of course, you mentioned item 2-1. Can you go into, without reading directly from it, but of course using it for reference, can you kind of discuss what one, I guess my first part of my question, ma'am, and I apologize, is just item 2-1. What was that item?
Item 2-1, do you not want me to read from the report?
I'll take that back. You can absolutely read from to
Okay.
better describe what item 2-1 is.
Item 2-1 is one tape sealed gunshot residue GSR collection kit. And then in parentheses is labeled E2. And then that belongs to David Solomon Duenas.
And so that would be the 30A that we previously discussed, correct?
Yes.
And what area or part of the defendant was that testing in relation to?
I believe it was collected from the hands, the right hand and the left hand.
And kind of based on the elemental composition and what you found with the testing, what were the results of that specific element of the analysis?
Can I add something to the previous question that you asked?
Please.
Sorry, you asked me where those were taken from. I actually did not collect those samples. So these sampling devices were labeled right hand and left hand. So that is what I went with.
So they're labeled and then the testing happens after that.
Well, they are labeled and they are collected by the agency. So I did not collect them, so I can't speak to where exactly they were collected from, but I took the labels and there wasn't any sort of other specification of anywhere else that it was collected from.
Okay.
So the right hand and left hand designation was used.
And I appreciate the clarification. And given, of course, the designation left hand, right hand, again, what were kind of the results of that analysis?
For item 2-1, which is again the gunshot residue collection kit, one microscopic particle containing lead, barium, and antimony, and one microscopic particle containing lead and antimony were detected on the right hand of David Solomon Duenas. And then one microscopic particle containing lead and antimony was detected on the left hand of David Solomon Duenas.
And so with GSR, it's never definitive. Are results definitive, or can they show what may or may not have taken place? How would you describe the results?
The results are described in my report with 3 different conclusions. And they are based on the morphology and elemental composition of these particles. David Solomon Duenas may have discharged a firearm, handled a discharged firearm, or was in close proximity to a discharging firearm.
And that language of may have, is that common? Is that something you typically see in this kind of testing?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because we can't definitively say gunshot residue testing does not tell you that somebody, yes, charged or discharged a weapon. All of these possibilities are equally as possible.
What? I apologize, just a moment of listening. Can you kind of clarify why that is to your last answer?
Because it's not like a DNA test where you can specifically tie a piece of evidence to a certain individual definitively. This is just, we are looking for the presence of these particles and whether or not they are present or not. The presence of these particles just indicates that they came from the primer cap of a weapon or a round of ammunition, and that they were created when a gunshot was fired.
No, thank you for the clarification. And what is the effect, or what effect can hand washing, for example, have on GSR?
Hand washing can remove GSR as well as physical activity, daily activities. It can remove GSR.
Now, ma'am, kind of moving on to the next part of your report, you had marked item 2-2-1. Can you briefly describe kind of what that is?
Yes. Item 2-2-1 is one black t-shirt.
And that relates to item 30B1 of evidence that we previously spoke about, correct?
Yes.
And do you mind going into kind of the results of your analysis there?
Yes. For item 2-2-1, 9 microscopic particles containing lead, barium, and antimony, and 1 microscopic particle containing barium and antimony were detected on the GSR sampling device collected from the front, right, chest, and sleeve area of the black t-shirt in item 2-2-1. Then 10 microscopic particles containing lead, barium, and antimony were detected on the GSR sampling device collected from the front left, chest, and sleeve area of the black t-shirt in item 2-2-1.
And then, ma'am, based on kind of that elemental composition and whatnot, with respect to, again, item 2-2-1, or what really has been shown to the jury marked in this court as 30B1, what were the results therein?
So based on the morphology and elemental composition of these particles, the black t-shirt in item 2-2-1 may have come in contact with a discharged firearm or was in close proximity to a discharging firearm.
And then we'll go to the third and final part of your report. In your report, there's kind of the mention of item 2-2-2. Do you mind just clarifying or discussing what that item is?
Yes, item 2-2-2 was 1 pair of gray sweatpants.
And that relates to the item of evidence 30B2 that's up there with you that we've previously shown to the jury, correct?
Yes.
And do you mind going into the results therein with respect to item 2-2-2?
Yes, item 2-2-2, 10 microscopic particles containing lead, barium, and antimony were detected on the GSR sampling device collected from the front right pocket and upper thigh area of the gray sweatpants in item 2-2-2. 10 microscopic particles containing lead, barium, and antimony were detected on the GSR sampling device collected from the front left pocket and upper thigh area of the pair of gray sweatpants in item 2-2-2.
And then with regards again to the elemental composition and the things that you analyzed in 30B2 or item 2-2-2, what was your result? What was the result of that analysis?
The results or the conclusions from that analysis were based on morphology and elemental composition of these particles. The pair of gray sweatpants in item 2-2-2 may have come in contact with a discharged firearm or was in close proximity to a discharging firearm.
And so many numbers have been going around. So with respect to the right hand and the left hand of the defendant, the final result or analysis was that they may have been discharged the firearm, handled a firearm, or been in close proximity. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, may have discharged a firearm, handled a discharged firearm, or was in close proximity to a discharging firearm.
And then with respect to the black t-shirt and the gray sweatpants, again, the result is may have come in contact with a discharged firearm or being in close proximity to a discharged firearm.
Yes.
State passes the witness, Your Honor.
Defense?
Thank you, Judge. So Ms. Hess, the whole subject matter or field of gunshot residue, is it limited to testing what could be on a person's hands?
No, it is not.
For example, if we're trying to reconstruct or figure out what happened at a particular crime scene, might the location of GSR, not only on an alleged shooter, but on other items or other persons, be informative?
It might be. I think that would depend on each individual case in question.
So the field of gunshot residue analysis is not limited to testing people's hands, correct?
Correct.
Are you familiar with the penal code in terms of the different kinds of offenses that involve firearms?
No, not really.
Would you agree that if a law enforcement or an investigator knew all the places where the gunshot residue was found, that might help them compare people's versions of events with scientific analysis and evidence?
That might help them, yes.
For example, in some shooting situations, the person being shot at is far away from the person being shot, correct?
Correct.
And so we wouldn't expect gunshot residue from the discharging to be on the alleged victim, right?
It's not uncommon to find gunshot residue on victims that has sustained injuries from gunshots or been fired at.
Okay, well, let's ask the question poorly. Let's distinguish between people that actually got shot and people that weren't hit, right?
Okay.
So when a person gets hit by a bullet, might they get gunshot residue from that?
Yes.
Okay. If they don't get hit by the bullet, under what scenario might a person get gunshot residue on them?
There's various scenarios. They could have been near the conclusions that I spoke of earlier. They may have discharged a firearm. They may have been in close proximity to a discharging firearm or handled a recently discharged firearm.
So in your training, you talked about on the job training as well as reading published articles. Are there studies that have been done about how far gunshot residue can be discharged once it's left the barrel of the gun?
Yes, there have been studies done.
Can you give us the jury an idea? We're talking about inches, feet, yards?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
What is a reasonable distance?
I can't give you that information because these studies have shown that it is too variable and dependent on individual circumstances, the type of weapon used. There's not really any set pattern of how far a gunshot residue is going to deposit.
Okay. So clearly there's an outer limit where it's not even possible that the gunshot residue could travel that far. Is that fair to say?
Well, that depends because the bullet or projectile itself can take gunshot residue with it and deposit it on wherever that lands. So.
Well, for purposes of our discussion today, so that we can make it more relatable to our case, let's assume nobody got shot.
Okay.
100 yards away, you wouldn't expect a person to have gunshot residue if they were 100 yards away from the person who's shooting the firearm, correct?
It depends how close the projectile flew to that person. It depends if it was outdoors, indoors, where was the person standing behind something? Was there anything obstructing? There's just too many variables to answer.
Are you suggesting that even great distances, or you're possible, and there's nobody hit by the bullet, you still could possibly have gunshot residue?
Yes.
Now, have you ever had instances where you've analyzed either test kits or clothing of potential victims?
Generally, we do not test victims' clothing. But yes, we have tested victims' kits.
For example,
if the allegation in the report is that person A shot at person B, and person B is available when the law enforcement comes, could a gunshot residue kit be done on that person
Person B was the person shot, correct?
or shot at?
Shot at, yes.
And it would be collected in the same way as you did in this particular instance from the alleged shooter, correct?
I did not collect that kit. The clothing was submitted and then the sampling device is taken from the clothing. So I did not collect the kit from the,
So. And I'm not sure we covered this. Describe how the kit is used in relation to clothing.
we, in our laboratory, we don't use a kit. We have these sampling devices. And so some items of clothing require 4 sampling devices from the areas that we would, think that would be most likely to deposit fine gunshot residue. In this instance, only 2 sampling devices were taken for each piece of clothing.
Are the sampling device is the same type of device?
Yes.
So how is the sampling device different from a gunshot residue kit?
The kit comes with a form that has spaces where law enforcement can fill out information regarding the shooting incident, who the kit was collected from, who the collecting officer who did the collection of the kit, the type of ammunition, if that's available, information is available, instructions on how to properly administer or collect the evidence using the kit.
So is it fair to say that the kits are used in situations where someone other than a laboratory person is collecting the samples?
That's possible, yes.
In other words, like, for example, at the scene of the alleged crime.
Right. You can use kits in a laboratory setting. It's just that our laboratory does not do it that way. It's probably more cost effective. I'm not exactly sure why we don't use kits, to be honest.
So the process is relatively similar, basically the same.
Similar.
Okay. So at the scene, the crime scene technician can use the kit to collect the sample, document it on the forms, package it, and then send it to the lab.
Correct.
Whereas in the lab, you actually have the item in your presence, like let's say, for example, this T-shirt, and you would lay it out like on the table or somewhere in the lab, and from different aspects of the shirt, draw samples.
Yes.
And you don't, and you keep your notes simultaneously as you're doing your work.
Yes. There are instances where a technician will do the sampling of the clothing, or in instances, it may be myself.
But either way, the analysis is the same. As long as you collect the
Yes.
sample correctly, then you can test it for an object you're looking at.
Correct.
So that takes me back to where I tried to start. So let's say you got clothing from the alleged victim and it was submitted to your lab the same way that the clothing was submitted of the alleged shooter. Could you do the same type of analysis?
Yes.
So that you could determine whether or not that person handled the firearm, discharged the firearm, or were in close proximity?
Correct.
Okay.
But may I add something?
Sure.
Again, we generally do not test victims' clothing because, especially like if there is a bullet hole in the clothing, our conclusions or analysis that GSR analysis will tell you is not going to be any different from knowing that that person has a gunshot, defect in their clothing.
Understood. But going back to my premise, we're assuming the person doesn't get shot, right?
Okay.
And we're just trying to determine, was this person actually in close proximity to the discharged firearm, right?
Okay.
And can you see where it might have some usefulness in the investigation, whether it's positive on the clothing, on the front of his clothing, back of his clothing, or not at all?
It's possible to have some usefulness, but that's not a decision I would make.
Good, but that information could be provided to law enforcement for their analysis in the grand scheme of their investigation.
It could be if they made that determination that they wanted to submit that clothing and requested a special provision be made that we do test the victim's clothing for whatever reasons.
Now, you talked about gunshot residue or kits being used on people's hands. right?
Yes,
Can it be used on other parts of the body or is it limited to hands?
it's not limited to hands. That is up to the submitting agency and what they feel would be a good place to collect those samples from.
Like, let's just take an example that has nothing to do with our case, just to make sure that I'm understanding your answer. Let's say that there's an argument and two people are fighting over the same gun. And there's a question about whether or not that's truthful or not. If we tested both persons' hands for gunshot residue, that might be helpful information for law enforcement.
In that particular scenario, no, because the conclusions would be the same. I mean, they both may have handled a discharged firearm. There may or may not be gunshot residue on there, so that can't tell you definitively any sort of conclusion.
Well, but if one of the two persons said, I wasn't even there, I had nothing to do with that scenario, right?
Yes,
And they get arrested and brought back to the scene and they test their hands.
that may prove helpful. Again, you would have to have other information, like do they own their own firearm? Because you're not gonna, the particles are the same across different types of ammunition. You're not gonna have that distinction.
Or a person says, this person discharged a gun in my direction, very, very close to me. Even though I didn't get injured or hurt and I don't have any injuries. Could you check that person's skin, whether it's their face, their arms, their clothes, to see if they might have been in close proximity to a discharge weapon?
Yes, if the officers collected those samples and submitted them, yes, we would test those.
Now, where does the gunshot residue discharge from the gun?
Any open areas of the gun?
So is that gonna depend on the kind of weapon that it is?
Yes,
So it could go forward, it could go backward,
yes, all of those.
or up or down.
Mhm.
Are you familiar with the weapon that was alleged to have been used in this particular case?
I am not.
Are you familiar with 9mm in general, handguns?
Other than they're named 9mm, no.
Okay. So when you said that you really can't put a distance on it, certainly gunshot residue can travel a few feet. Would you agree?
That's possible.
Like if two persons are right next to each other or struggling with a gun at the same time, that's certainly close enough to let gunshot residue transfer from the non-shooter to the person being shot at.
That's possible. And if they're struggling for the weapon, it's potentially they're both handling the weapon. So yes,
How long would it stay on a person's, even if they wash their hands, isn't it true that it can stay on them for a good amount of time?
generally studies have shown that it is recommended to collect between 4 to 6 hours after the shooting event. Because after that time, it becomes less and less likely to find gunshot residue.
And is gunshot residue visual to the naked eye?
No.
So even though.
Well, the primer gunshot, sorry, excuse me. The primer gunshot residue that I am looking for is not visible. There are other types of gunshot residues from like the gunpowder and things like that, but that's not what I'm looking for.
So it's not sufficient for an officer to say, well, I don't really see anything on your skin, so I'm not gonna do a test.
Are you asking me if
That's not a logical analysis to say, because I don't see something, I'm not gonna do a test.
yes, I would agree with that.
Now, does it make a difference? Maybe you've answered this, but I want to make sure it's totally clear. Does it make a difference in which direction the gun's being pointed in terms of whether or not gunshot residue gets on you?
If it gets on you, no, but there may be more deposited out of the opening, the muzzle, because that's the largest opening. Whereas, other places maybe are smaller openings. It just depends also on the type of firearm.
So for example, just to make a simple example, if a person shoots a gun up in the air over somebody else's head, may deposit less gunshot residue than if it's pointed straight at them, shot in their direction.
Not possible to say because it can deposit backwards as well. It just, there is a larger opening, so there is a greater chance out of the barrel of a weapon and the muzzle for gunshot residue to be deposited.
In your work at the laboratory, have you ever worked on cases where you had items collected from multiple persons for gunshot residue analysis?
Yes,
Multiple persons obviously involved in the same alleged event.
yes.
And have you had kits or samples submitted to your lab that you've analyzed that came off a person's body other than off of their hands?
I personally have not, but if an officer wanted to collect from a different part of the body, that would be acceptable. We would test those kits.
In other words, you would test it exactly the same way.
Yes.
And then there's no difference as far as how long it would stay on your body or what could happen to it, whether it's your hand, your foot, your face, etc.
There is, I believe if it's in somebody's hair, it has the potential to stick around a little bit longer. But if it's just on the skin, it would be the same.
Do you know whether or not crime scene technicians and or investigators are given training by the laboratory about this whole area of gunshot residue collection and analysis?
Official training, I do not believe so, but we do offer, guidance in how to properly collect gunshot residue collection kits.
So there's really not a limit to where you could try to look for gunshot residue in a crime scene. Would you say that's true?
Correct, but there are more likely areas where you may find gunshot residue.
And would you say it's more likely to find gunshot residue on somebody who was within 2 feet of a gun being discharged versus somebody who's 20 feet away from a gun being discharged?
I would say yes, that it is more likely, but it's not impossible to, I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
More likely somebody who's very close to the gun that's being discharged to have residue on them, so they can close, versus somebody who's far away from the gun.
The farther away somebody is, the likelihood becomes less and less, but it's not impossible to have gunshot residue.
And is it fair to say that the closer that the person is, the more likely that a search for gunshot residue is going to be fruitful, that you're going to find something?
Not necessarily. Again, it depends on a lot of different variables.
So let's say you're at the firing range and the instructor's helping you with the gun and you're both standing basically almost with your hands on the gun within that type of proximity. You would expect both of you would have some residue on your persons. Is that fair?
It is extremely likely, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, is this witness excused or subject to recall?
Excuse from the state, Your Honor.
All right, the rule has been invoked. What that means is you cannot discuss your testimony with anyone. You're only allowed to speak to attorneys for the state or the defense. Do you understand?
Yes.
All right, thank you. You may step down. Dinah, is there anything you need to sign from her?
Oh, no, we haven't.
Okay, all right.
It's for the officer, so.
Okay. Dinah, are you ready? All right, state, call your next witness.
State calls David Pendleton. Judge, may I approach?
Yes. All right, can you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, you can lower your hand. Have a seat. Be sure to keep your voice up for members of the jury and the court reporter if you'll state your name for the record.
My name is David Pendleton. That's Pendleton.
State.
Hey, Judge. Good afternoon. I think we just hit noons. What is your occupation, Mr. Pendleton?
I'm a firearms examiner at the Bexar County Criminal Investigation Laboratory, but most people just refer to it as the crime lab.
How long have you been employed at the crime lab?
The end of next month will be 18 years.
Have you done solely forensic there, or are there any other positions you've held at the crime lab?
No, strictly firearms identification.
What are your current duties?
On a daily basis, I examine firearms and test fire them. I also examine ammunition and ammunition components, such as fired cartridge cases and bullets. In situations with fired cartridge cases and bullets, I will make an attempt to see if they were fired from the same firearm.
Can you briefly explain what firearms or tool mark examination is for the jury?
Yes, ma'am. When a cartridge is fired in a firearm, there are pressures produced, which cause the bullet to exit the barrel, and in a semi-automatic, the cartridge case to extract and eject. When this happens, it's under extreme pressures, which causes markings to be left on those items, rather through direct pressure or through scraping along something such as the bullet going out of the barrel. It's passing along a surface, a bearing surface. Those markings are unique to those firearms and can be traced back to those firearms by using a comparison microscope, looking for both class characteristics and individual characteristics. Once we do that analysis and we feel there's sufficient agreement in these markings that we're looking for, we can make a determination if a particular item was fired in a firearm.
What's your educational background?
As far as education, I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a master's degree in justice policy, both from the University of Texas at San Antonio.
What specific training have you received in the area of firearms and tool mark examination?
The majority of our training is done within the laboratory itself. It takes several years. We also undergo outside training and attend when it's available. And we are required to undergo yearly proficiency testing by an outside agency. I'm also a member of the Association of Firearm and Tool Mark Examiners, and I'm certified in the area of firearms identification by that organization.
Have you ever testified as an expert witness before in the area of firearms or tool mark examination?
Yes, ma'am.
How many times would you say?
Around 90 times.
Is that here in this county?
Yes, ma'am, and other counties.
So what procedures do you follow in doing your examination?
In a situation, in a case where we have a firearm, we will actually examine the firearm, check its safeties, make sure it's safe to fire, obviously document it, its make, model, serial number. Then we will actually fire the weapon, generally into the range or into a water tank. If we fire it into the water tank, we're going to recover 2 spent cartridge cases and 2 spent bullets. And these are what we call our known standards. They're known because we know where they came from. They came from this firearm. From that point, we will put them under what's called a comparison microscope, which is essentially a microscope that has 2 stages, and you can see both stages under one set of eyepieces, hence compare them side by side. We will look at the class characteristics that are being exhibited by the firearm. And furthermore, we would go in and look for those individual characteristics that are unique to that firearm. If we find sufficient agreement of markings matching among the tests, then we will look at any questioned evidence to see if we see those same markings appearing on any questioned evidence. If we do see those questioned evidence have the same markings with sufficient agreement, then we can make a determination that they were fired in that firearm.
So you kind of briefly went over it, but what are class characteristics?
Class characteristics are very general in nature. They're such as the caliber, the shape of the firing pin, the number of landing grooves on a bullet or in the barrel. A particular make and model of firearm can exhibit the same class characteristics. They're not exactly the same, but they're very similar. Whereas individual characteristics are from the manufacturing processes, and they're very random in nature when it comes to manufacturing surfaces of the firearm. You can think of a grinding wheel, you see the little sparks flying off, that's metal moving off of the bearing surface, and it changes every time, so it's never the same on another firearm. So those individual markings are what can say that not only was this fired in a certain make and model, but it was fired in this particular firearm.
And how often do you make these sort of analyzations and comparisons?
Just what we do on a daily basis.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Okay, first, what's been marked and admitted as State's Exhibit number 29. You want to take a look at this. Do you recognize this?
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you recognize this?
Every item that comes into the laboratory gets a unique laboratory identification number called a CIL number. And it's written on the package. When I receive it, I'll rewrite that CIL number, my date that I opened the package, the initials, and an item number that I assigned this package.
And what is the CIL number?
The CIL number is 22-05364.
And does that match what you have for your report?
Yes, ma'am.
And so go ahead and open this and remove it. And this is part of that, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And are your initials also on here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so opening this, what do you recognize what this is?
It is a fired 9mm caliber cartridge case.
And so you recognize this from having worked on it, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So what sort of testing, like what's the first step you do once you receive this shell casing?
The first thing we would do is obviously document it, the brand of ammunition, the caliber, the class characteristics, because they may be different from a submitted firearm. So for example, if my submitted firearm had a circular aperture firing pin, but the firing pin impression on this cartridge case is of a rectangular nature, I don't have to do any further examination. They're obviously not the same firearm. If, however, they both have a circular shaped firing pin impression, then I would move more towards looking for the individual markings that are producing on the tests.
So I'm going to show you also now what's been marked and admitted as State's Exhibit number 31. Do you recognize this?
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you recognize this?
The same way, I rewrote the CIL number, the date I opened the package, my initials, and an item number I assigned the box.
And so would this contain the firearm that was collected?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is there a CIL number on this?
Yes, ma'am.
And does it match what you have in your report?
Yes, ma'am.
So upon opening it, we have several pieces of evidence that have already been admitted into the jury. We have the gun case. We have the 9 live rounds. We have an empty clip. And then there is also a smaller box inside that has been pre-marked as State's Exhibit 31A. Can you please take a look at this box and identify what this is?
When I mentioned earlier that as part of our process of examining the firearm, we will look at its safety features and then test fire the weapon and collect the knowns. These are the known standards. These are in this case, I fired in the range, so there'll be 2 cartridge cases in here, no bullets. But then I place them in this box.
So when you do this, are you using the ammunition that's taken and collected with the gun, or are you using other ammunition that you have on site at the lab?
We can use the ammunition that comes with the firearm, but we prefer to use our own ammunition because we know it has no other markings on them from cycling. As many of you know, you've probably unloaded your firearm many times. Well, you've actually put marks on it. We prefer to use ammunition that has no markings on it, so there's no question. So we use a similar type brand of ammunition, or at least a similar construction of ammunition. But we're not precluded from using the evidence ammunition that was submitted. We just generally don't.
Okay, and so in this case, did you use some of the crime lab's ammunition for the test fire? If you want
So I can just double check. So we put our format of our notes are different now, so I'll just find it.
I am changing it. Always makes it hard.
Yes, ma'am.
Changing that.
I'm sorry, changing the format of how we print our notes.
Always makes it hard.
Yes, when I used our own ammunition.
Okay, and use that to do the test fire on the gun in 31.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then what did you do? So you sorted in this box, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then when you were done, what did you label it with?
I will label it with the CIO number, the model, or excuse me, the manufacturer of the pistol, which in this case is a Springfield Armory, the model, which is an XD9 sub compact, the number of landing grooves that are in the barrel, the caliber, the serial number, the agency number, which in this case is Bear County Sheriff's Office. On the back, I will notate my initials and the date of the test fire.
Okay, and then do you also seal it with tape?
Yes,
Okay.
just with clear tape.
And then what is the CIO number on this?
22-05364.
Okay, and does that match with what you have on your report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and if we go ahead, I'll use my nails because I have longer nails to get this tape off. I'll open this and show you what's inside. Okay, it's a little. Yeah, I don't want to rip it too bad. So looking inside, are those the spent shell casings you were describing? And are those in the same and substantially similar condition to when you last saw them?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, at this point, we're going to offer State's Exhibit number 31A into evidence pending any objection.
I'm sorry, Judge, I was reading something. What's inside of 31A?
The two test fire shell casings.
No objection.
All right, 31A is admitted without objection.
Back in here. So, and then this, which has been admitted as State's 31. Can you please, this is the gun that you did the test fire on, correct? Can you please describe kind of the details and the characteristics? Like, what do you first do when you receive this gun?
Well, when we first get it, it's usually already checked to make sure that it's not loaded, but of course, for safety reasons, we double check it. As you can see, there is a band that is going through the barrel that basically keeps it from being in battery, so it can't fire. That's how it's generally submitted into the laboratory. And these tie twists are generally strapping it in. And generally you remove both of these with a small screwdriver. And you wanted the description of the firearm?
Yes.
It's basically a 9mm caliber pistol, Springfield Armory model, XD9 subcompact.
What kind of safety features come with this gun?
There's quite a few, but probably the most notable, you can see two of them.
Okay.
Well, let me explain the one you can't see. It's called a firing pin block. And it's located inside the weapon. And basically think of it as a piston or a cylinder that blocks the firing pin. It doesn't let the firing pin go forward unless something, which in this case is a bar, pushes that out of the way and creates the channel that the firing pin can stick through. That's just generally pushed out of the way when the trigger is pulled. As it's pulled, the bar will push up the piston to clear that passage for the firing pin to fire. If you don't do that, it's not going to fire. That firing pin block will always keep it from firing because it's a striker fired. Two other safety features that you can see are one back here. This is called a grip safety. If you see it move, the weapon won't fire unless that's engaged. And generally it's engaged by just holding the grip because the area of your hand is going to depress that. Another safety feature, probably hard to see from here, but we'll see it later. There's a little toggle switch on the firing pin. And what that does, if you don't put your finger on the firing pin and depress this little toggle, the firing pin can't go to the rear and release the firing pin. So if you try to pull that back without having your finger fully on the trigger, it won't go back. So those are just a few of the features it has.
When you were examining this gun, did you examine and check if the safety features were functional?
Yes, ma'am.
Were they functional?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If you know, with all of your experience with guns, how difficult is it for this gun to kind of just misfire or go off, especially with all of the safety features working?
As long as it's being used properly, it shouldn't go off by itself.
Okay, it should only go off when the trigger's being pulled.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So when you were doing, so you said that you did your examination, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Alrighty. Talk me through what you did to do the test fire on this weapon.
We'll go through basically a checklist, notate, make, model, serial number. I'll check to see it's obviously safe to fire by no obstructions in the bore. I'll notate a number of other things. I will check its magazine capacity, if it has a magazine. The type of firearm mechanism, is it a striker fired? Is it a hammer fired? If is it a semi-auto, is it a full auto? A number of things will go through, even the trigger pull, how much pressure does it approximately take to pull the trigger? A number of these things will go through, and once we've gone through that list, we will actually test fire the weapon.
How many test fires did you do with this weapon?
We generally do 2 test fires, and we do that for a reason. One is in a semi-automatic firearm, it checks if it's loading and cycling properly. So when you load it and you fire one, extracts, ejects, and loads another cartridge, you know it's working properly. Then you also, if you have a comparison to do, you have 2 items to compare to each other before you compare that to any questioned evidence.
In this case, did you do 2 test fires?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you compare it to the evidence collected?
Yes, ma'am.
And what were the results of your examination?
I determined that that cartridge case that we looked at earlier was fired in this pistol.
So the cartridge case matched and had the same characteristics of 2 that you did the test fire on.
Yes, ma'am.
And so it's your conclusion that it was fired from that same gun?
Yes, ma'am.
Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Defense?
So, Mr. Pendleton, how was the casing discharged for this particular type of weapon?
Well, I won't pull it back out, but it's generally, if the weapon is held in the proper position, which is forward, it should extract and eject through the ejection port somewhere to the right. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go directly 90 degrees to the right. It could go right forward, right back, right up. There's a lot of variables involved in that, but generally to the right.
Okay, so if a person is holding it kind of similar to what you were just doing, like you're firing at the fire range, for example, it should, as you're standing there, casing should go to your right.
Yes, sir. Generally, it should go somewhere in that vicinity.
Let's say that you're in an outdoor firing facility, there's no walls or anything around you, just you're standing there. So how far is it going to go away from you?
It's hard to say with, that's why we don't generally do that type of analysis, because there's so many variables involved. Could be 2 to 3 feet. It could be 10 feet. It just depends on the angle. If there's any obstructions, even if there's wind. But just think, if you fired it and it goes almost straight up and then comes back down, it could be almost right next to you. So it's very difficult to tell.
Okay, so let's change this scenario and say that you're in a firing range that has dividers, kind of like we've been seeing with COVID for the different people that are shooting. Where's it going to go in that scenario?
Like plexiglass?
Yes.
That would be an obstruction. Once again, that's like a variable. So it would, if you're firing and you have, think of it as a wall, it's going to hit it and go back the opposite direction.
So it's going to stay closer to the person, probably.
Depends on how close you are, I guess, to that wall and how far it can go past the person.
Now, let's change the hypothetical. Let's say the person fired the gun up into the air. what direction might the casing go?
Once again, lots of variables involved. If you're firing it into the air, if you're holding it in this manner, it would still fire to the right, but where to the right is really hard to say.
And it also is going to depend on which way that the gun is pointed, because in the first scenario, we're assuming the person's firing it in a fashion to fire forward, correct?
Yes, sir. You also have to take into account that the person is holding it in that direction. Sure, you've seen in the movies, many people will hold it this way. So those are one of those variables that are unknown. Yes, sir.
And when it's up in the air, your hand can be turned any particular direction.
Absolutely. You have a whole different radius of which way you can change it. So that would change where it would end up. Once again, one of those variables that you really can't count.
When you analyze this gun, could you tell it whether it's new or been fired many times?
Not really, no, sir.
So and that's not necessarily important.
It can be. We generally notate if it's a weapon's like really worn or rusty. But for the most part, they seem to be in really good condition. That really doesn't tell me how old it is. I mean, it's not going to be 20 or 30 years old. It's a newer model firearm, but that's not really something that I would notate.
Now, counsel asked you about an accidental discharge. What does that mean to you when you hear accidental discharge?
To me, an accidental discharge is when a firearm will go off without any assistance or very limited assistance. There's a difference between a negligent discharge versus an accidental discharge.
Okay. So accidental is more like when nobody intended for it to go off.
Yes, that there was something wrong with the weapon that made it capable of doing that. Yes, sir.
Now distinguish that from a person holding the gun in a way that you would normally hold it when it's fired. In other words, covering the different safety features you talked about, having your finger on the trigger or near the trigger, and it goes off without a person intending to do that. How could that happen?
Theoretically, if there is some type of safety recall on the weapon, which does happen, that is a possibility. The only other way it could happen with someone standing holding it, there are other options, but just holding the weapon in that manner, it shouldn't go off unless you pull the trigger.
Okay. And that was my next question. You talked about trigger pull. I'm assuming they all have the same tension or resistance on the trigger.
No, sir, they don't. They vary. But in this model of firearm and its type of weapon, they tend to be around a certain poundage.
Okay, so when you say they vary, describe what you mean by that.
Two different things. It depends if it's well, first I have to describe what action means. When we describe action, what we're talking about is what's happening to the trigger, or excuse me, what's happening to the hammer or whatever releases the firing mechanism. So in a double action firearm, when you pull the trigger, it's going to not only pull the trigger to the back, but it's going to cock the hammer or striker and get to a point, and then it's going to release it. So it just did two actions. It cocked it, it released it. A single action, the weapon is already cocked in some manner, and so pulling the trigger just releases it. So it's only doing one action. A single action generally takes less poundage to pull because it's already cocked, whereas a double action tends to take more force because it also has to do that mechanical function to get the hammer or striker back first.
And this type of weapon is a single or double action?
This is a double action only.
Now, so let's assume somebody has a gun in their hands in the way that you would have it if you were going to fire it with their finger on the trigger. Could the person being startled or have somebody put your hands on you when you have it in your hand, that cause it to go off?
Yes, I think that would be a possibility. Yes, sir.
Let's say you're at the firing range and you just expect everybody's in their spot. Nobody's gonna interfere with what you're doing. And somebody comes up to you while it's in your hand, with your hand in the proper position and pulls your arm back.
If it creates a opposite force, then yes, it's a possible.
In other words, it could cause the person to actually put enough pressure on the trigger for the gun to go off, even though the person holding it didn't intend to do that.
Yes, sir.
Can you describe the difference between different sizes of calibers and what are we measuring there? What does that tell us?
Caliber is basically the diameter of the bore. It's measured in different measurements. It can be the metric measurement for 9 mm, or it can be the standard measurement of increments, inch increments like 40 and 45 and 50 caliber. But basically it's the nominal diameter of the bore.
And so does that mean that the bullets are bigger or smaller?
As the number increases, the size of the bullet increases.
Does that also mean maybe the amount of noise it might make or the amount of damage it might do is going to vary depending on the size?
It can, but it also depends on the type of cartridge that the projectile is actually loaded in, the powder propellant. But generally, as your caliber gets larger, it is more forceful as far as not only its size and weight, but also its power.
And so what is the smallest and what's the largest?
The most common small caliber would be a 22 caliber, and followed to the probably, when I say these aren't the absolute highest, but in modern handgun ammunition, 45 would probably be the top that you would normally see. And then there's ranges in between.
And where does this particular weapon fall in the range between the smallest and the large one?
About the middle.
So, are you an expert? Are you knowledgeable about the discharging of the gunshot residue? Is that part of your expertise as well?
No, sir. I'm familiar with it just based on the nature of my work, but I'm not an expert in that area.
Okay. So when you talk about how much pressure or force is needed to discharge weapon, would you say that the 9 mm is kind of in the middle also in that regard, or is it on the lower end or the higher end?
I would say it's about the middle end. It's something that's a commonly used cartridge. Its next higher level would be the 40 caliber, which is what's commonly used as well. So it's less powerful than a 40 caliber if you're familiar with a 40 caliber.
So would you agree that it's not inconceivable that if somebody pulled on your arm that was holding the gun, that could cause you to discharge? That could cause enough pressure to discharge the gun.
The discharge doesn't come from that. It comes from the pulling of the trigger. But if I understand you correctly, could you pull the trigger if someone were to grab you and pull you? Yes, I think that's a possibility.
So we wouldn't call that an accidental discharge. What would we call that? Unintentional, I guess.
I'm not sure if I would call it accidental. But in that scenario, the scenario that you're giving, the person that's actually holding the weapon isn't doing anything other than holding the weapon. Someone else has intervened. So I'm not quite sure what I would call that. I'd have to think about that sometime.
Is this the kind of thing that in a gun safety course or in just learning about how to use a gun, that'd be part of the curriculum? When to have your hand on the trigger, when not to. Don't fool around or play around with other people when you've got it in your hand. Just common sense, things like that.
Yes, sir. If you've had any type of firearms training, safety training, one of the first things you will learn is to keep your finger off the trigger at all times until you're never pointed at anything you don't intend to shoot, and don't put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to shoot at your target.
Mr. Pendleton, do you know what distance this 9mm would typically discharge the projectile?
Not off the top of my head, no, sir.
I mean, can you give us a general idea, like in terms of more or less than 100 feet?
It would go more than 100 feet. But it's just exactly how far, I honestly couldn't think of it off the top of my head.
If we knew what direction the gun was fired, could you theoretically walk in that direction and find some place where it might have hit, or is that an impossibility?
If it was straight,
Yes.
possibly. The problem is that when you fire a weapon, it doesn't go in a straight line. That's a misconception. It actually goes in an arc. So as it first fired, it has a lot of velocity and it's going up in an arc, and then it starts to lose its velocity, it falls. How far away that could be, I couldn't say, but it could be quite a ways. Now, if you were to fire it upwards, obviously it's not going out, so it's going to go straight up, and it's still going to arc a little bit, and it's going to come down. Where that would fall, who's to say? So I'm not sure if I'm pulling the
Well,
question.
You're getting there. So the question is, could somebody after the fact come back and look for that projectile and try to find it? Or is that-
Potentially, yes, sir.
Is that going to be heavier than the casing?
The projectile, yes, yes, sir.
So it's less likely to blow away or somebody accidentally just kick it up the side. It's got a greater weight to it.
Yes, sir.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Excuse
Yes,
me.
from the state.
All right, the rule has been invoked. What that means is you can't discuss your testimony with anyone. The only persons you're allowed to speak to are attorneys for the state or the defense. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
State, next witness.
State rest, Your Honor.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do is we're going to take our break at this time, and we will be back here at 2. So that will give everybody hopefully enough time for lunch. If something happens and you need more time, just let the deputy know, but we'll be back here at 2. All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors. So everyone, we're going to go on our break.
Judge, I have a motion made. I can do it now after. Hold on.
Dinah, are you okay with hearing his motion now? Is it going to be long?
No.
Okay. All right, the state has rested defense.
Judge, we'd like to make a motion for instructed verdict on count 1 on the manner and means in which it suggests the pointing of a deadly weapon in the direction of the complainant, and that's complainant Duenas. And the reason I'm asking the court to do that, Judge, is because her specific testimony yesterday was that she never told anybody that he pointed the gun at her. That she never made that allegation, and I think the investigator followed up in his testimony and basically said about the same thing. And we did not hear testimony from anybody else or from any other source or any other suggestion that in fact that occurred. And so not only am I suggesting that there's not sufficient evidence for that issue to go before the jury, my suggestion is there's no evidence for that issue.
All right, state.
Yes, Your Honor. In count 1, there are 2 manner means. There is the pointing and the striking. We allege in the conjunctive proof and the disjunctive, Your Honor. So that is not grounds for a mistrial. Or for a directed verdict on that one. We were going to basically concede during our baby close, Your Honor, that we've proven the disjunctive, and what we have the testimony and the evidence for is for the striking her.
All right, so I believe defense is just, and I know you're allowed to prove both or one. I believe he's asking for a directed verdict as it relates to the count 1 where it says pointing said deadly weapon at and in the direction of the complainant, not the striking the complainant with said weapon.
Yes, Judge. The kind of issue with the terminology of directed verdict is that that's not how it goes back to the jury. When it goes back to the jury, they don't get a, you know, count one guilty as to this, or count one guilty as to this. I would rather just strike it agree to strike it from the indictment and just not have it sent back in the instructions to the jury, as opposed to a directed verdict, Your Honor, because I don't believe there's a mechanism for that.
Judge, problem is they've already heard it. I mean,
Mhm.
the indictment's been read to them. He's entered a plea to it.
Okay.
And so, they may have some confusion as to why there's something different in their instructions than what was.
All right, this is what the court is gonna do. We're gonna come back. The jury's coming back at 2. If y'all can be here exactly at 2, and I will give you my decision with regards to that exactly at 2. And I'll see if there's something that can be crafted if I decide to do what the defense is asking. But what I will say is no witness came forward to say that in regards to count 1, that the defendant ever pointed the deadly weapon at the complainant in count 1. So counsel, I do understand that, and I understand that the complainant from count 1 in the indictment stated that the gun wasn't pointed at her. The officer who came to testify said that she never told them that the gun was pointed at her. So I realize what you're saying, and I will come back with how that will be addressed. Okay. All right, thank you.
Judge.
And everyone make sure that everything's given properly to Diane.